Okay, so we'll look at division in integral domain. So we are essentially just trying to imitate the process of whatever we have done in number theory in Z here. Okay, so define basic concepts. One is irreducibles, primes, and associates. These are the three things which we should be familiar with. One is irreducibles. I have already defined this in the previous section. It is exactly the same thing. Okay, so irreducibles. So what is an irreducible in an integral domain? So I will fix this. This is a integral domain. So A and D, okay, D is an integral domain. Okay, A and D is an irreducible. Okay, it's just like how you have irreducible polynomials in QX. When do I say that a polynomial is irreducible? Yeah, I cannot break it down into two non-unit polynomials. Right? So here is another thing. A non-zero non-unit. So we only define this. Irreducibles and primes are only defined for non-zero non-units. Just like in Z, we don't define 1 and -1 are neither primes nor what is that, composites, right? So we keep those out when we want to define primes. Okay, anyway, so this is an irreducible if for any B comma C in D such that A equals BD. So if I can break A as B into C, what should happen? It is only possible when one of them is a unit. Okay, either B is a unit or C is a unit. So this is one of the properties of primes in Z, right? That's what we are trying to pull here. What about a prime? Okay, these are, I think we have defined some of these things. Okay, so a non-zero non-unit A and D is a prime. Okay, prime if for any B and C in D, if such that A divides BC, either, so if A divides BC, either A has to divide B or A has to divide C. Okay, either A divides B or A divides C. So okay, this is one thing. The next thing is associates, which we have already defined. So what are associates? It's nothing but unit multiples of the this thing. Okay, of the. So in fx, what are the units of a polynomial p of x? Yeah, it's the constants coming from the field, right? Constant multiples of that. Okay, so that's the one. So primes here. So you see in fx, there is one in linear algebra. You talk about the have you all done minimal polynomials? Yeah. So the minimal polynomial which you have, it is the generator of the of which ideal? The one which annihilating this thing, right? The set of all annihilating polynomials. If you look at the set of all annihilating polynomials, it forms an ideal. So we know from algebra that that's going to be a principal ideal. Okay. Now, given a principal ideal, it has multiple generators, but there is only one monic generator. What is monic generator? Power of the highest degree is 1. You're going to get only one monic generator because all the generators will always be associates. We will prove that. Okay, we'll prove that here. I don't know whether I have proved it in the previous this thing, but we'll prove it again here. So all generators have to be associates. Okay, so as you will see that there will be only one possibility for the monic generator. Monic generators you can't have two. So anyway, so this is a primes, then this happens. So what about so what are associates? A comma B in D are said to be associates, or let me put it this way. If A and B are in D, then A is said to be an associate of B if there exists a unit U in D such that A can be written as U times B. Okay, it's a unit multiple of B. Okay, so in Z, what are the associates of 5? 5 and minus 5. Okay, 1 times 5 and this thing. So if you know that the units are finite, the associates of a particular thing will also be finite, that many times. If you know that the units of a particular field are finite, or of a particular integral domain are finite, right? Like in Z, there are only 2 units, 1 and minus 1. Then the corresponding associates will also be finite. And it is very easy to see and important to prove that the relation of associates is a equivalence relation. Quite easy to see. So the relation on D given by A is related to B if A is an associate of B is an equivalence relation. How do we see this? One, you need to check reflexive. Why is A related to itself? 1. Take U as 1. What is the other one? Symmetric. So if A is related to B, that means I can write A as U times B. How will I write B as some unit times A? U inverse, right? Multiply throughout by U inverse because U is a unit, so it has a multiplicative inverse, so you get B is U inverse A. That's it. So symmetry. What about transitive? We have done this similar thing earlier, so I am not bothered about it. So if A is an associate of B and B is an associate of C, that means A can be written as U1 times B and B can be written as U2 times C. So therefore A can be written as U1, U2 times C. The only thing left to prove is that U1, U2 is a unit. Okay, product of 2 units is always going to be a unit because the inverse is, U1 inverse, U2 inverse. That you can prove. This is not difficult to see. So your ring nicely you can partition out into associates, right? That's what it tells you. Equivalence relation means it gives you equivalence classes, right? It induces the equivalence classes. Okay, now some more properties. So if you look at these two, okay, one question which you can ask is one of them lesser or more? Which property is less? Is it true that every irreducible is a prime, or is it true that every prime is an irreducible? What do you think? What is it? Every prime is an irreducible? Okay, so let's see. I think before that I'll prove one more statement, that is, you can see that an element is an irreducible. This is quite easy to see, that an element is a prime if and only if the ideal generated by the element is a prime ideal. That's quite easy to see. Okay, so so you take any A and D, then A is a prime. Again, D is an integral domain. If and only if the ideal generated by A is a prime ideal. Okay, and this is very easy to see. Assume that A is prime. This helps us because we know certain properties of the prime ideals, so we can use that. So if A is a prime, okay, I need to show that this is a prime ideal. How do I show that this is a prime ideal? And x comma y belongs to D such that, right, what is a prime ideal? If xy belongs to the ideal, either x is in the ideal or y is in the ideal. That's a prime ideal, right? If xy is in the ideal, either x is in the ideal or y is in the ideal. What do you mean by saying that xy is in A? Yeah, so this means that there exists some B in D such that xy is equal to AB, or in other words, this simply means that A divides xy. But since A is a prime, this simply means that A divides x or A divides y. Okay, which is exactly equivalent to saying that A divides x means what? You can write x as some t times A, right? But t times A is always in this ideal. Similarly, you can write y as some s times A, but s times A is always in that ideal. So this will mean that either x is in the ideal or y is in the ideal. Easy to observe. Okay, what about the converse? Is the converse difficult? In fact, this exactly pulls off this thing. It's not difficult to see this. Conversely, suppose is a prime ideal, okay, and A divides some B xy for x and y in D. I need to show that A is a prime. That means I need to show that either A divides x or B divides x. Okay, by the same type of argument, since A divides xy, what will happen? Xy will be in A, but this is a prime ideal, which means that either x is in A or y is in A. Okay, very simple to observe, which means that what is the meaning of x is in A? In terms of division, what does it mean? Yeah, it simply means that A divides x, or that's simple enough. So an element is a prime if and only if the ideal generated by the element is a prime ideal. That gives you another definition for a prime element. Okay, now prime ideal, that's fine. I think I need to I need to specify here that this is non-zero. I think so. So I will specify that it's non-zero so that I don't make an error. Yeah. So the other question is there a relation between primes and irreducible? That is, can you either directly see that every irreducible is a prime or every prime is an irreducible? So what you can see is that every prime is an irreducible. Okay, so oh yeah, that's another one we can easily show. Then we could use that also, give another proof to it. Anyway, so let's see. A in D difference 0, then yeah, this is not true here, we'll do this later. I think this I will not do here. Because if A is a prime, then A is irreducible. So how do I prove this? I want to prove that something is irreducible, so write A as some BC, right? I want to prove, and I need to then show that either B is a unit or C is a unit. Okay, so suppose B comma C belongs to D such that A can be written as BC. I need to show that either I need to show that either B is a unit or C is a unit. How do I do this? Where have I done this? I've misplaced this somewhere. Seem to have misplaced it. Okay, anyway, let's try. How do we do this? This is a prime, so I need to say it's irreducible. So this will mean that either A divides BC, it should mean that either A divides B or A divides C. A divides B, yeah, that's easy enough to see. Okay, so see here, so you can see from here that A divides BC, right? Because BC is 1 times A, so you can see that A divides BC. Now using the fact that A is prime, you will see that A divides B or A divides C. Okay, of course we can just assume that this happens without any loss of generality, otherwise you copy the same thing which we have done here for that. Okay, so without loss of generality, assume that A divides B. Okay, what happens if A divides B? You can write B as some A times something, right? So there exists some T inside D such that, or T in D is enough, such that B can be written as AT. Okay, so what do you do? Substitute that there, and what you will see? What happens? You can cancel out T on both, you can cancel out A on both sides because A is a non-zero element. So you can cancel out on both sides, and what do you get? So C is a unit. right? This means that C is a unit. T is the inverse of C, right? So that's this thing. So this means that C is a unit. So what I have proved here, that if A divides BC, then either C is a unit or B is a unit. So essentially, if A divides B, then C will be a unit. If A divides C, B will be a unit. So simple enough. So therefore, either B is a unit or C is a unit. Okay. So that tells us that A is irreducible. So every prime is an irreducible. The other way, that's another reason why we do this, right? So you can ask the other question, what about every irreducible? Is every irreducible a prime? Okay, and as we will see in this thing, that in many integral domains, in fact, I would go off on a limb to say that every integral domain that I have given an example of, you will actually see that this property is true, that every irreducible is a prime. Okay, up to now whatever we've gone, but we will give a example of an integral domain where a irreducible is not a prime. We'll see that later. Now we can look at some other properties before we go into giving this example. Yeah, so this is another one. We can do a lot of exercises here. So this is the one which will help you in your linear algebra. So if D is an integral domain, and A comma B belong to D, such that if the two ideals are the same, then they should always be associates. Okay, then A and B are associates. A very easy proof. Okay, if the ideals, the generators have to always be associates of each other. There is nothing else. In fact, you can go further than this. You can in fact say that's an equivalent statement. Two ideals are equal, the two PIDs are equal if and only if the generators are associates. That's also one way is quite easy to see. If A and B are associates, it is very easy to see that the two ideals are the same. So let's prove that first. So suppose A and B are associates. Okay, what does this mean? There exists a unit U in D such that A equals U times B. Okay, which tells you what? So I want to prove that these two sets are the same, right? I want to prove that these two ideals are the same. Okay, if A is equal to U times B, what does this tell you? A is going to be in that, right? But if the generator is in this, the entire ideal should also be there. Why? What are elements over here? They look like T times A, right? They look like T times A. But if A is already in that, any T times A will also fall in that. That's an ideal. What's an ideal? If you have an element in the set and any element outside, then the product is back in the ideal. That's the second condition of an ideal, of the ideal. So if A is in B, then the entire ideal should also be in B, and I expect that you will prove that on your own, because we will require this property very often, this fact very often. What about the other side? Follows in exactly the same way, because B can be written as U inverse times A. So also B equals U inverse times A, which is again going to be in the ideal generated by A, and therefore Okay, I hope you understood this. What about the converse? Not the converse, actually that's the direct, this is the converse. So what if we assume that these two ideals are the same? Okay. Again, not difficult to see. You should visualize actually nz's when I do this. You actually try to think of nz's, it becomes quite easy. When can nz be equal to mz? Any idea? Yeah, and? Yeah, how would you prove that nz, when can nz be equal to mz? I mean, if we are proving it in general, then this should be something obvious, yeah? How do you prove it? What are elements from here? They have the form m times k such that k is in z, and elements here are n times k, so these are just multiples of n, these are the multiples of m. So this is equal, n is anyway going to be in this, m is going to be in that. So since n is here, n should be here, that will mean that m divides n. Similarly, since m is here, m should be here, that means n divides m. Okay, and both these divide each other, which means that there is only one way, you have studied this in number theory, that their moduluses are the same. Their moduluses are the same, it means that n is. Okay, the other way is also easy to see, that you can prove on your own, that's too trivial. I'm going to imitate exactly the same process in this very easily, you can check. In fact, that's exactly what we do, is we imitate what we do in Z in an abstract way. So it's simple. So suppose this is equal to this, what does it mean? It means one, A is in this and B is in this, right? A is here, so it should be there, therefore this should be here. Similarly, this is there. What is the meaning of this? B divides A. Let's not even write this. This is a multiple of B, this is a multiple of A. That's what we visualize. So therefore, what happens is you have some T and S. I would have written U1 and U2, but then you ask me how you know it's a unit. Such that this is here means A is T times B, and this is here means B is S times A. Now what can you do? Take this substitute here, we'll get A equals Ts A. Okay, but A is I hope I have assumed. Yeah, that's this thing. That's a small consideration. That 0 occupies a single equivalence class. The associates of 0, multiples of 0 are 0 itself. You cannot get any other unit multiple. You multiply anything to 0, you get 0, right? So that remains. So you should actually also take one of the case where A is 0. If A is 0, what happens? If A is equal to 0, what happens? That means this is going to be the 0 ideal. Therefore, that is the 0 ideal. But the 0 ideal can be generated by only one element, 0. Therefore, B also should be 0. So that's easy to see. Okay, so that case I will leave to you. So case 1, A is equal to 0. This is when A is non-zero, then you can do this. Okay. Now you cancel, you get T into S is 1, which means that T is a unit. And if T is a unit, what does it mean? T is a unit, which means that A and B are associates. Okay, so now, we proved what we require. You see, you can now use this in, you can actually use this in fx, because when will two polynomials generate the same ideals? Only if the two of them are associates. When can the two of them be associates? Only if one is a constant multiple of the other. That's what you can use it there very easily. I don't know whether I have proved it there, but you can use it there. Anyway. Yeah, I will leave this out to you. I hope this is clear. Okay, maybe I'll do it. I'll write it down. So if A and D is a non-unit, if A and D is a non-unit, then multiplying anything to A will leave it as a non-unit. Okay, then for any B and D, AB is a non-unit. Very easy to see. Anyone can see why? If this is not a unit, then you multiply anything to it, it will have to be it cannot be a unit. Why? Suppose this is a unit, that means it has an inverse, say x. So ABX is 1. Now can you find the inverse for A? ABX is 1. So what will be the inverse of A? BX. You got the inverse. That's a non-unit. That's a contradiction. Okay. So simple to see that if this is a unit, I'm just proving what? The contrapositive. Right? If you want to prove that P implies Q, it is equivalent to proving that not Q implies not P. So prove not this. If this is a unit, that is not this. This is a unit, then that is a unit. Same as saying that. So if I multiply things to non-units, they keep them as non-units. Okay, so every prime is irreducible we have done. Yeah, so this is another one which you can see here exactly what you see in Z, that is, if you have primes, yeah, so if P comma Q in D, integral domain, okay, are primes such that, see, I know that if A divides B and B divides A, then A and B should be associates. Do you know that? How you know? If A divides B, B divides A and B should be associates. That's what I have proved here. Right? If A divides B and B divides A, then A and B should be associates. But if they are primes, okay, if P and Q are primes such that P divides Q, then what can you say? You can say that just like in integers, if you take two primes P and Q such that P divides Q, what can you say? Two primes in Z, P and Q, so that P divides Q, what can you say? Plus or minus. P has to be plus or minus Q. Okay? I'm talking about primes in Z, that means those are the primes plus or minus the primes in N. That's something which you need to. Okay. So then what happens here? P and Q are associates. How do I know this? Very easy to see. P divides Q means what? You can find some T in D such that Q can be written as T times P. Right? If I show that T is a unit, I am done. Right? But I know that Q is irreducible. Q is irreducible, right? If Q is irreducible, what does it mean? Either T is a unit or P is a unit. Can P be a unit? No. By definition of irreducibles and primes, we don't define units to be primes or non-primes, anything. Okay. So By definition, this is not a unit, so therefore T has to be a unit. Okay. So this means that T is a unit or P is a unit. As have I assumed extra? Yeah, it would be actually sufficient for me to say that Q is irreducible and P is a non-unit. That would be sufficient. Anyway, this is what we require to work with, so this is sufficient. Okay, so if this is a non-unit or P is a unit, but this means that T is a unit as P is an irreducible. Okay, and since this, did I prove this for primes? I think. Why am I proving this for primes? What have I used about primes here? Seems to work for irreducibles itself, right? Because proving something for irreducibles is better than proving something for primes, because every prime is an irreducible. Have I used anything about primes here? No, I've just used irreducible, right? So I can change this to irreducible. Okay, so if these are irreducibles, if that P divides Q, then that happens. Sufficient to this thing for irreducibles. And once it holds for irreducibles, it also holds for primes, because every prime is an irreducible. Right? Correct, no? Okay. Now, there is another one which we can prove. See, we know that every we can prove some special properties in PIDs, in principal ideal domains. Okay. The one thing which we would like to prove is that the prime ideals and irreducible ideals are exactly the same. Okay, that's one thing which we would like to prove, and we will also prove that the primes and irreducibles are the same. What did I say? Primes and maximal ideals. Prime and maximal ideals are the same in PIDs. Okay, so one, we will prove that the prime ideals and maximal ideals are the same. We know that every maximal ideal is a prime ideal anyway. We will also show that every prime ideal is a maximal ideal. Okay, and we will show that every irreducible element is a prime element. We know that all prime elements are irreducibles, so we now need to show that every irreducible element is a prime element. So these are the some two specific properties you can prove in PIDs. So the first thing which we can see, this is a more general statement compared to what we were proving in, to what we had proved in fx. In fx, we saw that the ideal generated by p of x is maximal if and only if p of x was a irreducible. Okay, we proved that the ideal generated by px in fx, the ideal generated by p of x was maximal if and only if p of x was an irreducible. Okay, we can prove this statement in a more general sense for any PID. fx was one of the PIDs. We can now prove this in more general. Okay, so if D is a PID, principal ideal domain, every ideal is a principal ideal, then and I'll say A belongs to D, prove that A is an irreducible if and only if the ideal generated by A is maximal. So let's see. Simple proof. Let's first assume that A is an irreducible and prove that this is maximal. Okay. As you will see, the steps are actually going to imitate the same proof which we have done back there. So suppose A is an irreducible and I is an ideal such that, what do we need to show? Either I is the entire D or I is, but we are working in a PID. What does that mean? That this is also a principal ideal, right? So as D is a PID, there exists some B in D such that I can be written as ideal generated by. So what happens here? This means that A is going to be in this. Okay, so this means that A is going to be contained in this, or in other words, B divides A or let me just write this directly. So there exists some C in D such that A equals BC. Okay, but A is an irreducible. A is irreducible. So what does that mean? Either B is a unit or C is a unit. What happens if C is a unit? Okay, first what happens if B is a unit? That means this is the ideal generated by a unit. So what it should be? The full integral domain, right? There is no other way, because if this is a unit, that means B times B inverse will be in I. That means 1 is in I. Once 1 is in I, all other elements, so any x times 1 will also be in I. So that will tell you that this will be the entire D. That is if B is a unit. What happens if C is a unit? C is a unit, what happens? A and B are associates. But if A and B are associates, what happens? The two ideals are equal. That's what he had proved, right? So this means that either B is a unit or C is a unit. If B is a unit, what happens? I will be equal to the entire ring, or if C is a unit, A will be an associate of B, or in other words, the ideal generated by A will be the same as the ideal generated by B, which is I. So a simple proof gives you that if A is an irreducible, then the ideal generated by A is maximal. Let's prove the other case. So I want to now prove that if the ideal generated by A is maximal, so suppose is a maximal ideal. Okay, this is a maximal ideal. I want to show that A is irreducible. Okay, how do I say that A is irreducible? Right, I start with saying that suppose I can decompose A as B into C, I will need to show that either B is a unit or C is a unit. So how do I do this? So I need to use the fact that A is a ideal, right? So that A is a maximal ideal, right? So one thing you can easily see is that B divides A or C also divides A. In any case, you can always see, in fact, that let us say use the fact that B divides A, it really doesn't make a difference. You can prove I don't know why I always write this, it's not necessary, that is obvious. All ideals are contained in D. I don't know why I write it. Anyway, so you can see that A is contained in B. Okay, so what happens? A is maximal, right? What does this mean? Yeah? Either this has to be this or this has to be the entire this thing. So this means that either A should be this or B should be the entire D, which is essentially the ideal generated by 1. Okay, so here this tells you that B is a unit. Why? Because the ideal generated by B is the same as the ideal generated by 1, which means that B and 1 are associates. That means B is a unit times 1, which is a unit, right? That is the same unit. So that's obvious. So therefore, this tells us that B is a unit. What does this tell us? This tells us that A and B are associates. If A and B are associates, that means I can write A as U times B. What do you compare with this expression? C is that same unit. Okay, this tells you that A can be written as B times U, but A can be written as B times C, right? So compare those two, you get BC is equal to BU, and therefore C should be U by cancelling out B on both sides, which can be done because I think we don't allow for maximal ideals to be 0, right? Since we don't allow for maximal ideals to be 0, this cannot be 0 and hence B cannot be 0, so you can cancel. That's fine. So that you can complete. So this will tell you that B is a unit, and this will tell you that C is a unit. You can follow the process. I don't know. Where is the so that's one thing which we have proved. That is one, that this is an in PIDs, by the way, here this only happens for PIDs, at least now. For now I have proved that it happens only in PIDs. Okay, I have used the fact that this is a PID to prove this. Where did I use the fact? Both cases I have used, so that's fine. Did I actually use it here? Yeah. Okay. The next one which we want to show is that every irreducible is actually this follows as a corollary to the previous exercise. From this you can see that every irreducible is a prime in a PID. Why? Can anyone tell me why? As a corollary to this, it follows that every irreducible element is a prime. Why? You look at the ideal generated by that element, it has to be maximal, but every maximal ideal is a prime ideal. But if the ideal generated by A is prime, then A is prime. That was one of the first things that we proved. Okay, makes sense? So let me just write it fast. So if D is a PID, A and D is an irreducible if and only if A is a prime. One way we don't have to prove, we know that all primes are irreducibles in any case. So that we don't need to show. Okay. So assume that, suppose A is an irreducible. What does this mean? That the ideal generated by A is maximal. But every maximal ideal is a prime ideal. Right? But the ideal if the ideal generated by an element is prime, then it means that A is prime. That proves the other side of it. The other one we have already proved. If A is a prime, then A is irreducible. We have already proved. That happens for every integral domain, irrespective of whether. Just a small this thing. I've proved this in a very specific case. I will actually be proving this in a more general case. As I've told you, that I will be proving that every PID sits inside a UFD. And this result actually also is true for UFDs. That is, every irreducible in a UFD is also a prime, which I have not done here. I mean, we have not defined a UFD. I think with this we have some things to work with. Yeah. Now for one special type of a ring, which so one special type of a ring, that is Z, in fact an integral domain, that's what we want to look at. Especially I want to see this for one particular example, that is that there is an irreducible which is not a prime. Okay, I want to give an example for an irreducible in some integral domain. I want to give an example of an irreducible which is not a prime. Okay, so this essentially will tell me, later on we will see, since I will show that every UFD, in every UFD, irreducible is always a prime. In UFDs, in general, I will show that irreducibles are always primes. So that will essentially tell me that every integral domain need not be a UFD. In fact, it gives you an example of a integral domain which will not be a UFD. That which we will see later. Okay, but I have to tell you why I am getting to something. So getting to this. But anyway, these are very interesting rings. So these are the integral domains which we are looking at. I'm going to do it for square free Ds, but it's not required for square free. You require at least, you actually require something less than that. You can check and tell me what it is. You need not be square free. Is it square free I'm looking at? Yeah. It need not be, you all know what are square free integers, right? Square free integers. So square free integers for me are first of all square free integers. Am I looking at, just a second. I think I better make a mention of this then. Yeah, I think I'll do the work in this itself. It is sufficient to say that. Not a proper square. Yeah, I will take D to be an integer which is not a proper square. So, not a proper square will first of all take all negatives, because no negative can be written as a proper square, right? You cannot take a negative integer and write it as x square. right? Negative integers you cannot write them as x square. So that will take all negative integers with it, and we will also have many others like 3, 4, 5, not 4, 3, 5, 7. All primes will also be included in that. Square free integers obviously will have to come, but more than that, I think I'll do it in that way. It's no need of taking this in that way. Okay, anyway. So I'm going to consider this particular ring. So we're going to prove a sequence of exercises. Okay, some sequence of exercises, very easy, not difficult. So consider D in Z such that D is not a proper square, That means for every x in Z, D is not equal to x square. Funny way of writing it, but yeah. D can never be written as x square. Okay, that's what, and so all negative integers directly are going to satisfy this. I'm going to look at this ring Z root D. Okay, so what is this Z root D? Let Z root D square root of D. Now when I talk about the square root of D, you'll ask, what is this square root of D? So you can think about it, since I don't want to do extra work, which you can do, and I know that you'll have all studied complex analysis. That's a complex number. Square root of D will be a complex number. If D is negative, it will be imaginary. Okay, otherwise also it's at least a complex number, right? So this is properly defined in the complex number system. If this is -3, D is -3, then this will be 3i, right? Complex number. So what I am going to define this to be is the set of all a plus b root D such that a and b are in Z. This is what I define this to be. I want to talk about some nice properties of this. Okay, firstly, it is easy to observe that this is an integral domain. Okay, so D is a complex number, so this is going to be a subset of the complex this thing. You can actually work without getting in the complex number system, but I don't want to take the effort, so you can try and see. There is a anyway, let me not do that. You can look at this as a subset of the complex number space. So this is an integral domain, and how do I prove it's an integral domain? So it's a subset of a field. C is a field, right? So it's a subset of a field. To prove that a subset of a field is an integral domain, what do I actually need to prove? One, I will need to prove it's a subring. Commutativity is going to come from the field itself, right? Commutativity is going to come from the field, so there is nothing to prove. What else do I need to prove? What is the integral domain? Commutative ring with no zero divisors, which again comes from the field, so there is no problem, and has unity. So the existence of the unity, which again is obvious. What is the unity element? 1, and 1 is in this because you can take A as 1 and B as 0, so you can see that 1 is in this, so no problem. So 1 is in this, so Z root D is an integral domain. In fact, the fact that this is an integral domain follows without putting any restriction on D. It's just that if this was a proper square root, then I don't think you'll get anything extra by putting this. You'll just get the full of Z, right? I hope I'm right. If this is a you'll just get the full of z if this is a proper square root. If this is a proper square, you'll just get, that's the positive square root, then this will be, depends on the choice of the square root also. So that I think I should have mentioned as to which is the square that would have to be, yeah. You actually need to fix one square root of d. There are two square roots of d, right? There are two, so in complex numbers, given a complex number, you will have two square roots. There is a, you need to fix one by working with this. That's okay. I think any one that you fix will work. There are two square roots, right? The square root of the square root of 2, the square root of not square root of 2, what is a nice this thing, minus 4 will be plus or minus 2i. Square root of this, what is the square root? It is what satisfies the equation, this equation, z square equals minus 4. So there are two what do you call it, complex numbers that satisfy this equation. One is minus 2i and the other one is 2i. So you have two square roots. In fact, you use any one of them here, it will always work. You need to fix one square root to talk about this. Again, you can see that irrespective of which one you fix, you will get the same ring. That's also another y is another thing, so that I think we can leave out. You'll have to actually ask. You will always get the same ring irrespective of the square root you fix. Anyway, let's not worry about that. So this is an integral domain. How do I prove it? One is, this is a subset of the complex number space. Okay, I'm going to just briefly write this. This is a subset of the complex number, this thing. 2 is B, 1 belongs to this, because you can always write 1 as 1 plus 0 root. Okay. So since this is in this, we don't need to worry about commutativity. Okay, we don't need to worry about commutativity. What else we don't need to worry about zero divisors. That's it. The next thing which you need to prove is that it is actually a subspace. Not subspace, subring. How do I prove it's a subring? Take any two elements from here and let x equals a1 plus b1 root d and y be a2 plus b2 root d for a1, let me say ai, bi and z. I need to prove two things. One is x minus y. Okay, x minus y is in this, which is very easy to see. Why? Exactly, this will simply be a1 minus a2 plus b1 minus b2 square root. The operations come from C only. I am using that, so that will be fine. So therefore this is also in z root d. Simple to see. Okay, and I also need to look at x times y, which you can take the product and convince yourself that it's in this. I don't want it. a2 plus, okay, let's do it. It kind of works like the components of this thing, but anyway, here see. So a1 a2 plus, what do you get? a1 a2 plus b1 b2 d, right, because square root into square root, it's going to give you plus, what gets multiplied to this? It's a1 b2 plus b2 a1. Okay, so something multiplied by root of d, check and see, a1 b2 plus a2 b1. Okay, so this is a integer, this is an integer, so that is also in Z root D. Simple. So that's a subring with unity, no problem. So therefore this is an integral domain, easy to check. Okay, complete the ideas. I'm not going to do that. Okay, now for this class of integral domains, we have defined an entire class of integral domains, right? We have defined an entire class of integral domains. For every d which is not a proper square, I can talk about this. In fact, here I have not even said it's not a proper square, but later on we will use that fact. I think so. Yeah. So for this class, I can, for this fixed this thing, I can define a nice function which will be helpful in determining what this Z root D is, which is quite nice. I think they call it as the norm, I'm not sure, but I think we denote it by n. So let n be the function from Z root D to the set of natural numbers union 0, okay, defined by n of any element from here, a plus b root d. It should go to, so I am defining kind of a distance, okay. So the one which we do is, this is a square minus b square d, that's modulus of a square minus b square d. Let us just check what happens. By the way, this we will, or the video which I have created, which I will not be doing in class. So the video which I have created is for when d is minus 1. That is called as Gaussian integers. When d is minus 1, it is called as Gaussian integers. And there's a beautiful structure of the Gaussian integers. Okay. You can show in fact that Gaussian integers are Euclidean domains. So the smallest among all of them, right? Euclidean domains, PIDs, UFDs. So you can show it's a Euclidean domain, and since it's a Euclidean domain, it will also be a UFD. So a nice interesting question would be, what are those? How do you factorize in Gaussian integers? What are Gaussian integers? A plus IB, where A and B are integers, right? So it's the lattice points in the complex space. Lattice points means integer comma integer. In your complex space, it is the integer comma integer points. So that's yeah. So you can see over there here, when d is minus 1 in particular, when d is minus 1, what does this turn out to be? The modulus, right? The modulus square. The modulus square, because modulus is the square root, right? When d is minus 1, you get a square plus b square, which is the modulus square of the complex number. A plus IB, right? That's what you get. A plus IB, when d is minus 1, you get a plus IB. So this actually turns out to be the modulus square. So this is a generalization of the modulus, complex modulus. It's just a generalization of that. Okay. So this function has some nice properties which we try to manipulate. So what are the nice properties which are there? So the following properties hold. So in a way it's like a norm. As you will see, there are many properties of the norm which hold here. One is n of x is 0 if and only if x is 0 for every x in the x in z root. Okay, you know that how happens for norms also, right? Norms of on a vector space. Similarly, this is another property which you know happens for this thing. So n of xy is nx times ny for every x and y in z root. C. So this helps me to catch hold of units, because n of x is 1 if and only if x is a unit. Okay, so to check whether this in fact follows easily from this theorem, from this fact here. I don't know whether you can see it. Can you see it? Why it follows from here? Anyway, we'll come back to it. Then there's another one, which is, this is just one direction, that is, if nx is a prime, then x is irreducible. Okay, if n of x is a prime, it's better I specify where, right, is a prime in n, then x is an irreducible. It is, the other side is not true. The other side is not true. We will actually see an example why the other side is not true. Okay, I know it looks odd, but we will use these functions to give us some nice examples. We will use this function to give us some nice example. Okay, so let's prove the first one. I think all of us can prove the first one on our own. So to make it easy, let me just take A as a1 plus b1 root d. We will take x as a1 plus b1 root d, and I will take y as a2 plus b2 root d. Okay, and let's prove all of this one by one. So this happens means what? N of x is 0 means what? a1 plus b1 root d is 0. What does this mean? I'm sorry, I made a mistake, right? Yeah, so that is 0 is easy to show anyway. So nx is 0 means this, so a1 square, square root of a1 square minus b1 square d is 0, which means that a1 square is b1 square d. Can anyone see any problem in this? Is this possible? Is there a problem in this? Or what do we want to show? X is 0. Okay, it would be nice to show that a1 is 0 and b1 is 0, right? So if I show that a1 and b1 is 0, then x will be 0. Can I from here say that a1 and b1 are 0? Okay, so D is not a proper square, right? That means there should be some prime. Actually, there are two possibilities. One is D is negative. If D is negative, then there's a problem. Not possible. Okay. If D is positive, then there should be some prime whose power is not even in D. Right? How do you get proper squares? In natural numbers, how do proper squares come? Look at the prime factorization. Right? Proper proper squares or squares of integers are essentially going to be the ones which have all prime powers as even. All prime powers as even. Right? Just look at the prime factorization. What is a square? If you look at the prime factorization of x or of n, you have p1 raised to alpha 1, p2 raised to alpha 2 up to pn raised to alpha n, pk raised to alpha k. Look at n square. What is n square going to be? p1 raised to 2 alpha 1 into p2 raised to 2 alpha 2 up to pk raised to 2 alpha k. So all the powers have to be even. Right? Prime factorization is unique. So we have that. So if this is not a proper square, it means that there should be some prime here whose power is odd. Okay, some prime here whose power is odd. Make sense? But these are both squares. You look at the power of that particular prime p in B1, that should be even. So in the prime factorization of B1 squared d, the power of p should be odd, here even. So odd. See, if it's there, if it's not there, then this thing. In any case, p has to be a divisor of a1. So the power over here in a square will have to be even. Okay. So even or 0, it doesn't matter, but here it's going to be odd. Okay. So since d is not a proper square, okay, I need to take two cases, right? Case 1, d is negative. This will be mean that this will, because this can't be negative, this will mean that a1 is 0 and b1 is 0. As yeah, I don't want to write the reason, you can write down the reason. Case 2, d is positive. This will mean that d is a positive proper square, which means that first of all d cannot be 1 because 1 is a proper square. So this will mean that there exists a prime p such that p divides d and the power of p in the prime factorization of d is odd. Okay, the power of p in the prime factorization of d is odd, which will mean that the power of p in the prime factorization of b1 square d is also odd, because this has to be either 0 if p appears here, or it will be this thing. Okay, but the power of p of any prime in a1 square is even, right? So I should have said something, right? So here is, if b1 is not equal to 0. If b1 is not equal to 0, then this happens. If b1 is 0, then it doesn't make any sense. Then you get 0. If b1 is 0, then a1 will also be 0, right? So if b1 is non-zero, then this happens. This is odd. The power of p in the prime factorization of b1 square d will be odd. But the power of p in the prime factorization of a1, now a1 cannot be 0. If b1 is not 0, then a1 cannot be 0. This is a contradiction, which means that, is it okay? If b1 is non-zero, then the power of p, I can only talk about prime factorization for non-zero this thing, right? So therefore I need to say that b1 is non-zero. If b1 is non-zero, then the power of p will be odd. I want to show it 0. If I show b1 is 0, a1 will also be 0. So this will be odd, but then a1 will also be non-zero. If b1 is non-zero, a1 will be non-zero, and the power of p in a1 square will have to be even, because it's a square. The power of any prime in a square will be even. So that's a contradiction, because both these are equal. That's not possible. So therefore b1 is 0, which means that a1 should also be 0, which means that x should be 0. Okay. What about the other side? What if a1 is 0? That is easy. Why? So if x is equal to 0, what happens? a1 plus b1 root d is 0. You check what you want to prove. You want to show that this is 0, right? So take this to that side. a1 is minus b1 root d. Square on both sides. a1 square will be b1 square d. Bring this back to the side, you will get a1 square minus b1. This is 5th standard maths, right? So this will mean that n of x is 0. Of course, you can then take the mod. So this has that nice property. Yeah? Mistake? Here? Why this happens? I did not get you. Where? Here. Say, if you take square root, what will you get? Okay. Okay. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it depends on how much you are ready to assume. That would be okay if you are ready to make that assumption. I think that you are making quite a few assumptions there. But yeah, there are a few assumptions that you are making there, because square root of d and again, yeah, the square root of a1 square is again plus or minus. There are two square roots, and yeah, it's kind of correct. Yeah, a1 would be plus or minus b1 root d. That's right. And you are saying that b1 root d is not going to be in this thing unless b1 is not an integer. Root d is not an integer. Therefore, b1 root d will not be an integer unless b1 is 0. Why not? Can you say that? How do you prove that? That b1 root d is not an integer? Okay. Why? I mean, that's not true. I mean, you can have half. Half is not in n. I mean, not in integers. 2 is an integer, but the product is an integer. That's what I said. So there are certain assumptions that you are making if you do that. So if you can square, we have not assumed it's square free. We have assumed anyway. We have assumed that it's not a proper square. No, I agree with you. D is not in Z. Okay. Why is b1 root d not in Z? I agree with you that root d is not in Z. I mean, I agree with you that root d is not in Z. But why is b1 root d not in Z? Because you are using that, right? So, why? But that will mean that root d is not in Z. How do you know that b1 root d is not in Z? That's what I'm saying. I can give you a ring, like you can take you can take Z. I mean, half is not in Z. 2 is in Z, exactly like what you are getting here. b1 is in Z. This is, but the product is not in Z, you know. So that's this thing, like there are certain assumptions which you are making, which yeah, you would need to, anyway, that's okay. So this is what we have, and yeah, so next is for x and y, you have to prove that nxy is nx into ny. I think this I'll leave to you. This is pretty trivial, it's just basic calculations. You just have to compute on both sides and take the product. That's how simple it is. You take nx is what? Nx would be nothing but mod of a1 square minus b1 square d, and what would be n of y? a2 square minus b2 square d. So then you look at axy, nxy, you take the product, you will get something, put it out, check and see, just take the product. Product of this is just going to be this thing, right? Split your, put your this thing to one side. What will you get if you want to do it? The d part will have to keep on one side, so this is a1 a2 square, then these two, I don't know where I put it, I'll have to check, minus d times something, right? So b1 b2, oh, let me just multiply, so minus a1 b2 square d minus a2 b1 square d plus b1 square b2 square d square, right? That's what we get. I think here a1 square a2 square plus, I think this is sufficient. a1 a2 okay, so this is what you get. Now you check what is xy, what is xy going to be? Let's check the product. a1 a2 a1 a2 plus b1 b2 d plus, correct, a1 a2 plus b1 b2 d plus what is it, a1 b2 plus a2 b1 square root of d. This is what it is. xy is what I'm looking at. This is a mistake. Oh, I'm sorry. This is nx times ny. Okay, so you got what is xy, compute what is nxy, and you should get exactly the same thing. You can try and see, it's not that difficult. You would have to take the square of this. There's one thing which you have to observe here is that this middle term is going to go away, right? So what you're going to get, square of this, what is n of this going to give? Mod of a1 a2 plus b1 b2 d the whole square minus a1 b2 plus a2 b1 square d, correct? What's the middle term over here? 2 times a1 a2 b1 b2 d. What is the middle term here? 2 times a1 a2 b1 b2, and then there's the d outside. So those two middle terms will get cancelled, right? The middle term here and middle term here will get cancelled, and what you're going to be left with is all these terms. You can check and see, it's not that difficult. Just all the middle terms you can see now. Now what is going to be left? Just both the side terms. The first side term is here, other one is this side. First term, last term, first term, last term. Simple. Okay. So this is another property. Finally, I want to show that x is a unit if and only if n of x is 1. So For this, I simply use this fact here. Okay, it's simple to see. So suppose x is a unit, third one, suppose x is a unit. What does it mean? X is a unit means what? There is a y, so that nx is 1, right? There exists a y in z root d. Now the computations are over such that xy is 1, which means that n of xy would be n of 1. Anyone can see what is n of 1? 1, because 1 can be written as, that's a unique way of writing, by the way. That's something else which I should have said, but anyway, that's a unique way of writing. So nx, this would be 1, and this would be nx into ny. Now these numbers are whole numbers, they are either natural numbers or 0, and their product is 1. So what are the possibilities? Greater than or equal to 0. Therefore both of them have to be 1. These are both greater than or equal to 0. Integers, see by definition modulus of, these are all integers inside here, and you are taking the modulus of that. So therefore this means that either n of x is 1, this means that this is 1 and this is 1. Okay, so in particular n of x is 1. Product of two integers is 1, positive integers is 1, which means that both of them are 1. Okay, what about the other case? Suppose n of x is 1, then what happens? Mod of a1 square, I am taking this as x, right? So minus b1 square d is 1. What does this mean? I have to be, I have to check what is the, yeah. So I have to give you a inverse for x. In this case I need to give you an inverse for x. What would be the inverse for x? Yeah, so what would be the inverse for x? So here you can see that this is actually by imitating the what is it, a square plus b square. You can write this as a plus b, I'm right, no, into a minus ib, kind of imitating that. What you get is, just to get this thing, I don't know otherwise, yeah. So this into the, so you get a1 plus b1 root d. You can check and see that this is what you will get. Okay, a1 minus b1 root d. You take the product of this, you will get this. Check and see. a1 square, and then what else you are left with? a1 square, a1 b1, and b1 a1 is going to cancel, so that you are going to be left b1 square d. This is fine. Okay, it's okay. Yeah, so what does this tell us? What will be the inverse? The other one always, I think it would depend on whether this number is positive or negative. That's the this thing, right? So see, if this number, this product here, if this is positive, then you can knock off the modulus and that will be the inverse of this. If this product, what is inside the modulus, is negative, then what will happen is this will be, because this would be minus 1. So then that minus you'll have to pull into this. So then it would be minus a1 plus b1 root d. Okay. So case 1 is if your a1 square minus b1 square d is positive, it cannot be 0 because this is equal to 1. So this is positive, it means that if this is positive, that means the modulus is going to be the same thing, right? So therefore, what will happen is a1 plus b1 root d into a1 minus b1 root d would be equal to 1, which means that a1 minus b1 root d is the inverse of this. Inverse. Okay. There is an error in my notes. I need to change it. So the second case is a1 square minus b1 square d is negative. In this case, what happens is this product would be minus 1. a1 plus b1 root d into a1 minus b1 root d would be minus 1. Okay, but if this is minus 1, now you can pull this minus for this, right? And you will see that minus a1 minus plus b1 root d is a1 plus b1 root d. You can just do these calculations on your own, it's not that difficult, right? Pull this minus, multiply by minus and push that minus here, that would give you the inverse. So it depends on which one it is. Finally, the last one is exactly enough of time to prove that. We'll show that if nx is a prime, then x is irreducible. That follows straight away from the previous results, right? So suppose n of x equals p is a prime. If this is a prime, I want to show that x is irreducible. You want to show that x is irreducible, break it down into something and show that one of the two are units. So suppose and a comma b belongs to z root d such that you can write x as ab. What does this mean? Take n on both sides. What do you get? P equals n of a, n of b. What does this tell you? Yeah, product of two, these have to be natural numbers now. The product of these two natural numbers is a prime. What does that mean? One of them has to be 1, right? So therefore either n of a is 1 or n of b is 1. But we know by the previous arguments that this means that either a is a unit or b is a unit. That's it. And therefore x is an irreducible. So next time we will show that you have an irreducible in some integral domain which is not a prime. Okay, simple one which uses all these facts multiple times. Okay.